I've decided to record everything I know about this thing that has come from the woods. Once I finish typing, I'm going to attempt to leave and make my way into town. My truck is maybe 40 feet from the front door, and the nearest town, Fairview, is about 30 minutes by vehicle. I'm not sure if it'll even come for me. This is the third time it left a carcass by the cabin. First was a raccoon, second was a coyote, and 20 minutes ago, I found the remains of a black bear outside. A slow steam is still rolling off its corpse, dissipating into the night air. I can't sit here forever. It's just, I don't know. I'm scared. It knows I'm in here. I won't patiently wait for it to come through the walls. Currently, I'm in a cabin in Mio, Michigan. The dirt driveway is close to half a mile long, stretching far into the woods, and ends in an open field where the cabin I reside in stands. I rented the cabin for a couple of weeks, so I could just have some time away. My phone lost signal about 10 minutes before arriving here, but that was part of the idea. I wanted to be alone. I didn't even bring a gun. I brought some hiking boots for fuck's sake. I arrived a week ago and settled in quite nicely. I spent the week walking through the woods, sitting by McCollum Lake as I drew in my notebook and wrote music. I never felt alone, but then again, I'm in the woods. There could be rodents, birds, or any number of woodland creatures just around the corner. I never would have suspected my intuition to be so correct. It first made itself known while I sat on the back porch one night. I noticed a flock of birds vacate a pine tree that abruptly shook far into the woods. I watched closely, the sun only just setting. I assumed a tree had fallen, perhaps hitting another tree nearby it. I finished my beer, stood up, turned on the lantern, and reached for another beer. I stared in the direction of the noise. I felt a sudden silence in my surroundings, as if every other creature of the night was staring in the direction of the fallen tree. Moments passed, and crickets began to start chirping again, and even the coyotes began to yip, returning to their hunt. I thought nothing of it and finished my drink. I turned off the light and went to bed. Some hours later, I woke to the sound of footsteps, not inside my cabin, but outside. I was reminded of the original Jurassic Park movie, the cup of water shaking as the approaching footsteps of a prehistoric beast grew louder. I laid in bed and stared at the one window in the bedroom. The noise grew so loud I could hear things falling in the living room. I gripped the covers and never removed my gaze from the closed blinds of my window. There was a pause, and the rumbling steps began to subside. I could tell, whatever it was, had already stepped out off the open field in which my cabin stood and made its way back into the woods. I jumped out of bed and ran to the living room, hopping over fallen knickknacks and picture frames. Gripping the handle, I swung the front door open and stepped outside. I was overcome with the smell of rot. The body of a raccoon lay about 10 feet from me. I saw a trail of rustled grass and blood spots from the other side of the woods where the noise had first come. My breath appeared in the cold night air as I was overcome with panic. I stepped back inside and closed the door, but continued to look in the direction the footsteps disappeared. I couldn't see anything, other than the trees and moonlight. I slowly creeped through the cabin, as if it could hear me or something, and made my way to my phone on the charger. I checked the signal. I already knew I didn't have any, but why not at least try? I searched the cabin for hunting gear of any kind until early morning. Nothing. I sat in the cabin, holding my truck keys. I have to run for it, I mumbled to myself. It knows I'm in here, right? Why else would it drop the raccoon outside the cabin? I thought. Maybe it was returning with a fresh kill, but misplaced it. Also, what is it? We don't even get moose this far south of the Upper Peninsula. I walked to the liquor cabinet and grabbed the first bottle and poured a shot. Somehow, city life didn't seem so bad. The sun rose and the day went by. I began to grow uneasy. Come on, just run for the truck. Open the door, start the engine, and floor it. I repeated to myself as I stood outside the cabin on the small porch leading to the grass. I clutched the truck keys 4 times now. I leaned my body weight in the direction of my truck, as if I was about to throw a leg up and begin to run. My shoulders rose to my neck as I heard a sudden nostril flare off to my left. There it was, standing as still as a statue and looking right at me. The being was massive, easily 9 feet tall and 5 feet from shoulder to shoulder. It could wrestle a moose to the ground. It stood on 2 legs and was covered in sticks, blood, and fur. Its jaw hung low and slowly dripped slobber. Its massive frame moved up and down with every breath it took. The air leaving its body would ever so slightly move the branches of the trees right beside it. The head looked like a deer mixed with a wolf. It had antlers, but were broken off on one side. Its eyes were hollow, voids of darkness. It was holding a coyote in one hand. The coyote was clawing and trying to flee, but was already missing limbs. I've seen enough. I stepped back towards the front door, opened it, and rushed inside. I closed the door and began to hear the footsteps approaching. Faster this time. With this speed, it could have easily gotten me before I could have reached my truck. I shook my head and focused. I lunged for a knife from the kitchen, but was too late. It had reached the cabin and slammed down the coyote onto the ground. I could hear it hit the dirt. I held the knife and dove under the kitchen table. The footsteps were already leaving. I sat there shaking. I realized the power this thing had. It could have easily broken down the door and mauled me before I even turned around with the knife. I'll never leave this cabin alive. Hours have passed since then, and suddenly night is upon me. I decided to text everyone I know and tried calling every emergency number possible. My phone isn't even using roaming bars. My laptop has a full battery, but that obviously isn't good enough without internet. I made myself eat some lunch meat and drink some water. I begin shaking when I walk around the cabin. Every time I step on a board that creaks, I'm terrified to hear those footsteps again. The speed of the creature is remarkable, and to my horror, I see that it can be very quiet too. As I scoped out the route to my truck for the 100th time, I noticed the remains of a black bear sitting outside my door. I never once heard the thundering steps approach the cabin. It's just toying with me. I'll say what I've written on my laptop now. Maybe it doesn't even want to kill me. It doesn't matter. I can't stay here anymore. I love you, Hannah. I'm so glad you weren't able to come with me. So when I was little, my stepdad used to work the night shift at a gas station on the outskirts of Reno, Nevada, in a nice part of town, off the highway, before you head up to Sierra Nevada and Lake Tahoe. It's also the route you could have taken to reach Donner Pass, which is the party, along with the Reeds, who were settlers, that got snowed in on their travels to California and wound up eating their dead companions to try and stay alive. The area back then was fairly new, and the Shell gas station was really nice. There were quite a few other stores in that area, along with a bagel shop and a grocery store. And everything was made out of this really dark wood paneling. My stepdad never had any problems working the night shift, though he did tell me some interesting characters would come in, and he often had regulars that he became friends with. My stepdad was the only one in the shop when he worked the night shift, and he was always told about the ghost that liked to pester the other workers, like turn off lights, open or close bathroom doors, knock snacks off the shelf, the works. My stepdad, being the massive skeptic as he is, didn't believe any of these stories, and because nothing ever happened to him, he just brushed them off. Until one night. My stepdad is working one of the night shifts, and it's a pretty quiet night. He hasn't had any customers coming through, other than for gas. And since it's a pay-at-the-pump station, hardly anyone comes into the store. So my stepdad is playing on his phone and frequently glances up at the doors or at the security monitors to see if anyone is coming, but the station is deserted. He turns his attention back to the game when he hears the electronic sliding doors open and the sound of the bell above the door goes off. My stepdad puts his phone down and looks up to greet the customer, but he doesn't see anyone. He calls out, but no one answers. He glances at the security monitor, but doesn't see anyone else in the shop except him, and there are no cars at the station or in the parking lot. He gets a little weirded out, since the doors have sensors, and the only time they open is if they sense someone approaching them. But he just chalks it up as a prank or some sort of malfunction and gets back to his game. Hello. He hears the voice clear as day right in front of him, and his head immediately snaps up to speak to the customer he clearly did not see before. There's no one there. He's even more weirded out, but convinces himself he was either imagining things or that the sound somehow came from his phone or the radio. And then he hears the screams. He said the sound of the woman screaming came out of nowhere, and they were so loud and so chilling, he jumped and dropped his phone. My stepdad is a pretty big guy, around 6'2", and a little hefty, and he doesn't normally get scared over anything, but he said the screaming terrified him so much, he couldn't really think straight. He ran out from behind the counter and checked the aisles, but no one was in there. He checked the bathrooms and maintenance closet, and no one was in there, but the screams were still going. So he thinks maybe there's a woman outside who might be hurt or being attacked. He runs outside to where he thinks the screaming woman is, and there's no one there. The lot is empty. There are no people, no cars, nothing. He checks around the back of the store and does a loop, but he can't find the source of the screaming. And just as suddenly as the screaming had started, it stopped. He goes back inside and checks the security tapes to see if he's missing anything. But other than him running inside and outside the store like an idiot, he doesn't see anything. And he's unsure of what to think. The next day, as he leaves work and his coworkers take over, he tells them what happened, brushing it off as just some weird prank some little shit pulled. But the coworkers' response was very different. And even though my stepdad doesn't believe in any sort of paranormal activity, the words still stick with him all these years later. Oh, so you've heard her too. Hi, my name is Sam, and I'm not going to name the other people I was with due to privacy, so I'll be calling them Ted and Alex. Also, I'm from New Jersey, and this encounter happened to us in the park in between Central Jersey and North Jersey. I'm also of Native American descent, and I'm pretty sure that a few nights ago, my friends and I encountered something which I believe to be a skinwalker. A few nights ago, my friends and I were just hanging around driving when one of them suggested we should go to the park and watch the sunset over the lake. We got to the park around 7:15, and we ended up making our way to the trail which led to the lake. My friend Ted ended up talking about cryptids and other shit and said we might encounter something at the park as we were on native land. My friend Ted then indicated that there was something ahead of us, and us calling his bluff laughed at him. He then brought up a video of a sound effect of the goat man trying to scare us. My other friend Alex said it sounded like a skinwalker. And as you know, when you're on native land, you can't say that name out loud. Just to clarify, there was no one on the path except my friends and I. 2 minutes after he said that name, I looked behind us, and we saw that we were being followed by something. It was tall, skinny, and moved very slowly towards us. I said under my breath, "Oh shit," and my friends turned around and saw whatever I was looking at. I said to them that we should pick up the pace a bit, as it seemed a little weird that this thing came out of nowhere. We saw no indication of anything, no footsteps or rustling in the woods. And my friends said to me once this thing appeared, they smelled something putrid, which in Native American lore, if you smell something putrid or disgusting, that's a sign a skinwalker is on your trail. So we ended up running as fast as we could down the trail to try and lose it. When we turned around, it was still moving at the same pace, very slowly. Thinking that we were safe, we started to walk at normal speed. We were also close to the road with a bunch of cars roaring past us. Me being curious, I looked behind us to see if the coast was clear, and to my horror, I saw that that thing had caught up to us. It was now at least 100 feet away, making no sound as it moved, and we were horrified to see that it had no face. My friends and I decided it was a good idea to bolt as fast as we could back to my car. When we got back to the parking lot, I saw that the only car that was left was my car, and whatever that thing was that was following us was horrifyingly real. Fast forward a day later, I was walking my dogs around my house, and I saw a cat come out of the woods and start walking towards me. Me, knowing that skinwalkers can take any form, I went back inside, not taking any chances. A few hours later, I picked up my friend Ted, and we originally were going to go back to my house and play video games. But as soon as we got to my house, he said he felt dread, so we ended up just driving around a bunch. Today, he ended up telling me that whatever he saw at the park, he saw at my house, giving me the same description as what we saw at the park. He said it was tall, skinny, and had no face, describing the same thing that we saw at the park. So, skinwalker, or creature that stalked my friends and I for a few days, let's never meet again. This happened early this year. I have a best friend who I'll call Jade. We live in Alberta, Canada, and this happened in the winter. I was having a sleepover at Jade's house one night. We had a few drinks and watched some scary movies. The night went pretty well, but around 8 a.m. that morning, this strange thing happened. About a year before this occurred, I had heard about this girl who was in Jade's closet. So, Jade's friend, who I'll call Lexi, told Jade that she had seen a little girl come out of her closet every time she stayed the night there. She described her as looking a bit like Samara off The Ring. Long black hair, a white dress, except she was very small, like a small child. So when I heard that story, I got a little freaked out, but didn't think much of it, as I was a little skeptical. But in February of this year, it was pretty early, and I was half awake. I didn't know Jade was awake, so I opened my eyes a little bit, and I was facing Jade's closet. I was just blankly staring at it for a minute. Then all of a sudden, my body froze. From Jade's closet, from the other side of that closet door, I heard, in a child's voice, "Hey." That's when I freaked out on the inside. Then I instantly felt a rush of very cold air flow over me. It was almost as if the heat from her room got sucked right out of it. It was such an uneasy and cold, dreadful feeling. It was winter too, so there was no way that the heat had gotten turned off when it was negative 25 degrees Celsius. I had instant chills. I went to wake up Jade, and I asked if she had heard that too. She said she did. She assumed that it was just me, talking and mumbling things in my sleep. I thought she was still asleep, so luckily, I wasn't the only one who heard that. It shocked me. Then, I thought back to the time Jade's friend, Lexi, told her about the little girl in Jade's closet. Lexi has seen her a lot, but neither Jade nor I ever saw her. That was very freaky. We were home by ourselves at that time too, so we still to this day have no idea what that was. I still think about it a lot. We even told Jade's mom and her sister about it too. They were confused, because they weren't even home at that time. Lexi has also said that she has never seen that girl whenever she's at Jade's dad's house. It's always when she's at her mom's house. I didn't believe Lexi's story at first, being very skeptical, but now, I do believe. There is a spirit of some sort living in Jade's room. Forgive me if this story gets a little all over the place, as this is not isolated to just one event. Rather, it spans 14 years of my life. While I was growing up, I had a spirit that basically watched over me while I was at home. Ever since I was a baby, he was always around me. I called him the farmer, but I can't honestly tell you why. The name just came to me and stuck, but I can say that my property used to be a field, and I found super old and rusted nails and hinges for barn doors in our small horse pasture. These items were always basically made of rust, far too weathered to be from our own tiny barn. But anyway, the farmer always appeared as a shadow on the wall in human form, never a solid mass or mist. However, his shadow would appear and move in places where nobody else would be, so it was never anybody else's shadow I would see. Sometimes, when I would watch TV in our basement, he would stand behind the couch and myself. The hair on the back of my neck would stand on end at the feeling of his presence there, even if I wasn't scared. It was kind of like how static electricity would make your hair stand up if you rubbed a balloon on your head. That sort of feeling. He followed me all throughout the house, but never left the property itself. When I'd go to my room or the bathroom, he would wait outside the doorway, but he never entered those two rooms. Instead, he stayed in front of the doorway like a sentry, waiting and guarding me. Now, I didn't know he was guarding me for a long time, but I grew up with him, so it was normal for me anyway. He never appeared for anyone else but me, but he did do things that couldn't easily be explained away that my parents witnessed. One instance was our stove light turning off. I had been in my room, unaware of anything going on outside of my personal space. My parents were in the bathroom, and the stove light in the kitchen was on. However, when they exited the bathroom, they found it to be off, switched off. The knob physically had been turned. They questioned me about it, but I told the truth, that it hadn't been me. and I was too short to reach the light at the time anyway, as I was only a child, and nobody else had been in the house to do it. Another instance is while my mom was in bed. Her doorknob started to turn. She's an extremely light sleeper, so she woke up to it and watched it in the dim light turn and turn and just keep turning slowly. It never opened. She thought it was me coming in at first to tell her I was sick, but when the door never opened, she finally got up and opened it herself. Nobody was on the other side, and I was fast asleep in my bed. We also have outdoor cats that oftentimes come inside. Before anyone says anything, they were strays when we got them and get extremely stressed out when inside for too long, so they have to live outside. Still, they're spayed and neutered and up to date on their shots, even back then. Anyway, it was a spring or summer day when I was maybe 13, and our cat Daryl comes trotting through the kitchen. The funny thing is, we knew all of our cats had been outside, and my mom and I were the only ones home. We were unpacking groceries in the kitchen, so we definitely had not let the cat in. Yet, the door had opened just long enough to let him inside. Also, it happened without us hearing it, but we were certain he had been outside beforehand. When I was 14 is when the farmer stopped being so frequent at the house and staying with me. One day, I was going down to the basement to go watch some TV and relax. However, I didn't make it the whole way down the stairs. Before going further, I have to explain that my basement-way staircase goes straight down for about 14 steps. Then, you get to a little landing and turn left to finish off 3 more steps. I had made it to the landing and turned to step down, but I stopped in my tracks. I can honestly say I didn't see anything, but I felt it. Coming from the opposite corner was the strongest sense of hatred and danger I had ever felt in my life. Even to this day, I felt like if I took one more step down into the basement, I could die. Yet I saw nothing. Then, I got another feeling, a much more familiar one. I felt the presence of the farmer standing right in front of me, protecting me from whatever malicious force was in the other corner of the room. Needless to say, I bolted back up the stairs and slammed the basement door shut, even locking it. After that, I stopped seeing or feeling the farmer for a long time. Years passed without anything. I fully believe he was my guardian angel and gave himself to protect me that day. He probably died as a farmer on the field my house was built on, but he was such a good soul and turned into my angel. Every now and again, my family and I experience different paranormal events. We're pretty sure we have a couple new spirits that stick around, and a few that just pass through. But every now and then, I like to think the farmer managed to come back for visits, to check up on me, and to make sure I'm doing okay. A little info. I'm a 21-year-old male with a criminal justice career. I live in a small town in South Dakota called Belfouche. I live in a rural country town in South Dakota, close to the Wyoming state line. There's a small town with a population of 15 people and an old store gas station about 19 miles away from where I live. This small store is full of antiques, town merch, and odds and ends. Before it was a store gas station, it was an old bed and breakfast inn. I'm not sure if there are any records of anyone passing away in the building. One time, when my little brother, friend, and I were in the store, we wanted to look around and check if they had any new cool things to look at. So we all walked up the old creaking stairs, and I went into the room directly right of the top of the stairs, and my brother and friend went into the room directly to the left of the stairs. I was about 3 or 4 steps into the room, and I heard someone coming up the stairs behind us, and I just thought it was the store clerk, following us upstairs to make sure we didn't steal anything because we were the only customers in the store. So I stopped, turned around, and went to see if my friend found anything cool. And when I get to the doorway, I look to the left of me as I'm hearing footsteps down the stairs, and there's no one there. There was no one walking up the stairs, even though I'm still hearing someone walk up the stairs. I motion to my friend and brother to walk to the doorway, and I just point down the stairs. They both look down the stairs, and they both just turn white. They can still hear the footsteps, even though there is no one there. My friend wanted to leave right after that, but before we left, we asked the clerk behind the counter if they had any experiences of paranormal activity in the store before, and she just smiled and let out a small chuckle. She said that the only thing she had experienced is hearing footsteps from the second floor while she was checking out the last customer of the day. Even though I experienced the ghost footsteps while I was there, I still go back every once in a while to check things out, but I've never experienced anything since. This happened many years ago. I used to live in a small town in South Africa called Amanzimtoti. Translated from Zulu, it means sweet waters. Not that important, just a fun little fact. Now, the house we lived in was in a huge valley with thick tropical forest that I used to explore all the time. I knew that bush from one side to the next. I loved it. We had the odd person walking through the bottom of our yard, but nothing too major. One day, I decided to build a wooden cabin for myself on the edge of the bush. I wanted to get out of my folks' house, but wasn't ready to be completely on my own, as I was still about 14 years old. One night, when reading my book, before I found any of the social media platforms, I heard this sound, as if someone or something was walking up and down my porch. I looked out the window and saw nobody, so I just thought, must have been a mongoose, nothing to worry about. A few minutes later, it happened again. Now I was getting pissed, thinking why would someone walk up and down and scare the hell out of someone? So I ran out and it stopped. Nobody was there. No animal was there. A few minutes later, the dogs all around me start going crazy. This was my routine for years. Every night, every day, the same. My parents thought I was mad and wouldn't believe me. One night, my sister and myself were sitting on the lawn outside watching the stars when the world went silent. It went eerily quiet. Then, the sound of big boots walking up and down the porch started. I looked at my sister and said, "See? I'm not crazy." Her face went white like snow. The next day I moved out, back into the main house. Nobody has ever lived in the wooden cabin again. From what I hear of the new people who rent my folks' house from them, is still to this day. It still paces, still walks up and down on the porch. I've heard many stories of women in white roaming the highways, but never encountered one. Heard about them in a few places around South Africa. Till one day, I heard of one up the road from me. Knowing the stories, knowing what happened to people who saw them, I thought to hell with it. My ex-wife just left me. I don't care. So I jumped on my bike and set off. I get to the stretch of road. In the distance, I can hear lions and zebras from the nearby lion and rhino park. I slowly roll down the road, looking for her, but nothing. I can't see her. Months go by. I find out she was involved in a motorcycle accident where her boyfriend, that belonged to the Hells Angels, found out she was cheating on him and chucked her off the back of the bike. Then one day, my friend Robert phones me up. "Jude, listen, you won't believe what happened to Matt." "What happened?" "He went down on the corner you've been riding around every Friday. Over the radio, he said he saw a woman." "You're joking, right? She's there?" "Yeah, she is." A break, just as I was starting to believe she wasn't ever there, and just a local myth. So off I go. 20 minutes later, I reach the crash site. With what I knew then, I stop and call out for her. Nerves sore as I call. I can feel that I'm not alone. "Candace, I know you're here. It's okay. You can leave and go rest now. Please. You're causing so much pain. Please leave and rest." Nothing but the sound of cicadas and lions around. I try calling again. "Candace, please. I know you're here. Please leave. It's okay." Still, just in the distance, just lions. As a cold sweat forms, something's not right. I need to get out of here and fast. So I floor it out of there, only to have my bike start misfiring and slowing down to a stop. I take this as a sign. "Okay, Candace, I'm right here. I'm listening." There's a soft voice on the wind, but I can't make out what it says. "Candace, if that's you, I can't hear you." I slowly start walking to the sound, but I suddenly stop and say to myself, "What on earth are you doing?" As I return to my bike, I see the lights are back on and it's idling smoothly. I put my helmet on and slowly pull away. In my mirror, I see her standing in the bushes on the other side of the road smiling at me, slowly fading away. To date, not a single biker has crashed on that corner. Not another person has seen her. I feel that she has left and is at long last resting. I know I wrote this in third person, kind of, but it's a real story. When I find the articles, I'll post links to them.